My name is Booker Coleman. I am 68 years old and formerly the head of maintenance at Mercy General Hospital here in Chicago. For 40 years, my hands were covered in grease and drywall dust, ensuring that boilers stayed hot and emergency generators never failed. I am a man who believes in hard work and looking a person in the eye. But I never imagined that the hardest thing I would ever have to fix would be the mess my own son made of his life. The glowing red numbers on my bedside clock read 2:14 a.m. when the ringtone shattered the silence of my empty house. My heart hammered against my ribs as I fumbled for the receiver, thinking someone had cheated. It was my son Jamal, and he was hysterical. "Dad, please, you have to help us. Tiffany has a ruptured appendix. The hospital demands a $70,000 deposit right now, or they will not operate. She is going to die." In the background, I heard my daughter-in-law Tiffany wailing in agony, a sound that would break any father's heart. But then, 35 years of working in a hospital sharpened my ears. The wailing stopped for a split second, and I heard a cold, sharp whisper. "Tell him it is a critical emergency cry, louder." That whisper chilled my blood faster than the Chicago wind. I gripped the phone and said one single word. Number one, I hung up the phone and went back to sleep while my son screamed my name. The next morning, the call did not come from the hospital. It came from the Chicago Police Department. Before I tell you what the police found, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to stand your ground against a family member who tried to take advantage of your kindness. I need you to understand that I am not a cruel man. I loved my wife Bessie with every breath in my body until cancer took her 5 years ago. We scraped and saved every penny to send Jamal to college so he would not have to crawl through ventilation shafts like I did. When Jamal married Tiffany, I emptied my retirement fund to give them $50,000 for a down payment on a house in the suburbs. I drive a 15-year-old truck so they could drive a brand new sedan. I have eaten canned soup for dinner so my granddaughter Keisha could have ballet lessons. But that night, as I lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling fan, I knew something was wrong. You see, I spent my life in the basement of Mercy General fixing pipes and listening to doctors. I know the Emergency Medical Treatment and Labor Act better than I know the Bible. In America, it is illegal for an emergency room to refuse life-saving surgery just because you do not have insurance or cash. If Tiffany really had a bursting appendix, they would have had her on the operating table before Jamal even dialed my number. But Jamal did not know that because he was panicked and blind with love. And Tiffany did not know that I knew because she thinks I am just a stupid old man with a checkbook. She thought she could play on my fears, but she forgot that I know the sound of a hustle when I hear one. I tried to go back to sleep, but my hands were shaking. I sat up and looked at the photo of Bessie on my nightstand. I prayed I was right. I prayed I had not just condemned my daughter-in-law to death over a suspicion. But deep down in my gut, I knew that whisper was real. The next morning, as I was making coffee, the phone rang again. I expected it to be Jamal cursing me out or telling me Tiffany was dead. But when I looked at the caller ID, it said, District 4 Police Department. My stomach dropped. I answered, and a heavy voice said, "Mr. Coleman, your son Jamal is in custody. You need to get down here immediately." I grabbed my keys and ran out the door, not knowing that my life was about to change forever. To understand why that phone call shook me to my core, you have to understand where I came from. I did not just wake up one day as a suspicious old man. Life made me this way. When my wife Bessie passed away from ovarian cancer 15 years ago, I was left with a teenage son and a house full of silence. I had to be both mother and father to Jamal. I worked double shifts at the hospital fixing boilers in the dead of winter, and repairing air conditioning units on rooftops in the blistering July heat. Every dollar I saved was for him. I wanted Jamal to have the choices I never had. I wanted him to hold a pen for a living, not a wrench. When Jamal met Tiffany, I tried to be happy for him. She was beautiful, I will give her that. She had that porcelain skin and blonde hair that looked like it belonged in a shampoo commercial. But a father knows when someone is looking at his son and seeing a person or seeing a paycheck. I pushed those doubts down because Jamal was smiling for the first time since his mother died. When they decided to get married 5 years ago, I did something that my friends called crazy. I walked into the bank and withdrew $50,000. That was my entire retirement nest egg. It was the money Bessie and I had saved for trips we never got to take. I handed that cashier check to Jamal so he could put a down payment on a 4-bedroom house in a gated community. I remember the day I gave it to him. His hands were shaking. He hugged me so tight I thought my ribs would crack. He said, "Dad, I promise I will pay you back." I told him the only payback I want is to see you happy. I drove home that night in my 15-year-old Ford F-150. The truck has a rusted bumper and the engine rattles like a bag of bolts, but it runs. I could have bought a new truck with that money. I could have fixed up my own kitchen. Instead, I ate instant noodles and watched television on a 12-year-old set, while my son and his new wife moved into a palace. I did not mind the sacrifice. That is what fathers do. We plant trees so our children can sit in the shade. But I never expected that shade would turn so cold so quickly. The problem was not the money. The problem was that the more I gave, the more Tiffany expected. She called herself a luxury real estate agent. But in the 5 years they were married, I never saw her sell a single house. She spent her days having lunch with friends and her afternoons shopping online. I would visit their house to fix a leaky faucet because she refused to call a plumber, and I would see the hallway stacked with delivery boxes. Designer shoes, expensive handbags, gadgets that nobody needs. She drove a brand new SUV that cost more than my annual pension, while Jamal was driving a beat-up sedan to work. I watched my son fade away. Jamal used to be the life of the party. He had a laugh that could fill a room. But year after year, I saw the light go out in his eyes. He was working as a mid-level manager at a logistics firm during the day, but it was not enough for Tiffany. She needed more. So my son with his college degree started driving Uber at night. He would work from 8 in the morning until 5 in the afternoon, come home for a quick dinner, and then drive strangers around Chicago until 2 in the morning just to pay for her credit card bills. I saw him one Sunday when he stopped by my house. He looked 10 years older than his age. He had dark circles under his eyes, so deep they looked like bruises. He fell asleep sitting up on my couch with a half-eaten sandwich in his hand. It broke me. But whenever I tried to talk to him about it, he would shut down. He would say, "You do not understand, she has certain standards, she is used to a certain lifestyle." I wanted to scream that a lifestyle should not cost a man his soul, but I kept my mouth shut to keep the peace. I walked on eggshells because I was terrified of losing access to the one bright spot in that dark situation, my granddaughter, Keisha. Keisha is 6 years old, and she has my wife's eyes. She is the reason I wake up in the morning. But Tiffany knew that. She knew Keisha was my weakness, and she used that little girl as a weapon. There were weekends I would drive 45 minutes to their house just to see my granddaughter, only to be met at the door by Tiffany. She would not even let me step inside. She would stand in the doorway blocking my view and say, "Oh, Booker, we are actually busy today, maybe call next time." Or even worse, she would make comments that cut deeper than a knife. One afternoon, I came straight from the hospital after fixing a sewage line backup. I had showered and scrubbed my hands with industrial soap, but Tiffany wrinkled her nose as soon as I walked up the driveway. She looked at Keisha, who was running to hug me, and said, "Keisha, sweetie, do not hug Grandpa too tight. He smells like industrial cleaner and grease. We do not want that smell on your new dress, do we?" I froze. I watched my granddaughter hesitate, confused. She looked at me and then looked at her mother. That moment of hesitation shattered my heart. I pulled my hand back and forced a smile. I said, "It is okay, baby. Grandpa is a little dirty today." I saw the smirk on Tiffany's face. It was a look of pure triumph. She was teaching my granddaughter that my honest work was something to be ashamed of. She was building a wall between us, brick by brick. Jamal stood there in the living room looking at the floor, too exhausted and too beaten down to defend me. That was when I realized this was not just a bad marriage. This was a hostage situation. And my son and granddaughter were the prisoners. I bit my tongue so hard I tasted blood that day, but I promised myself I would not let her win. I just didn't know that the war was about to start with a phone call in the middle of the night. The drive to the 4th District Police Station was the longest 40 minutes of my life. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned the color of ash. I kept expecting to get a call saying it was a mistake. I kept expecting to hear that Tiffany had passed away on the operating table and Jamal was arrested for grief-stricken outbursts. But when I walked into that station, the smell of stale coffee and despair hit me like a physical wall. I walked up to the desk sergeant, a man with tired eyes who looked like he had seen everything, and told him who I was. He typed my name into the computer and gave me a look that I will never forget. It was a look of pity mixed with judgment. He buzzed me through. When I saw Jamal, my knees almost gave out. My boy was sitting on a metal bench in the holding cell, his head in his hands. He was still wearing his Uber driver uniform, a wrinkled polo shirt that was now stained with dirt and tears. But it was his face that broke me. His left eye was swollen shut. His lip was busted. He looked like he had gone 10 rounds with a prizefighter. When he saw me, he didn't even stand up, he just crumbled. He grabbed the bars and whispered, "Dad, I didn't do it. I swear to God I didn't touch her." I looked at the officer and asked what the hell happened. The officer read from the report in a monotone voice that made my blood boil. He said the complainant, Tiffany Coleman, alleged that the suspect came home in a rage, demanding money for drugs. When she refused, he assaulted her. I felt the room spin. Drugs. Jamal had never touched a drug in his life. He didn't even drink beer on Sundays because he wanted to be alert for his shifts. But Tiffany knew exactly what buttons to push. She knew that a white woman crying about a black man demanding drug money was a story the system would eat up with a spoon. The officer continued saying that because of the severity of the accusation and the visible marks on her, which she claimed were defensive wounds, she had been granted an emergency protective order. That meant Jamal was not just in jail, he was homeless. He could not go back to his own house. He could not see his daughter. She had taken his freedom, his home, and his dignity in one single night. I looked at my son, and I saw the terror in his eyes. He wasn't just afraid of jail. He was afraid because the woman he worshipped had turned into a monster overnight. I paid the bond processing fee, which took a chunk out of my savings, but I needed to get out of there before I did something that would put me in a cell next to him. I told Jamal to sit tight and that I would be back with a lawyer, but first I had to go to the house. He looked at me with panic and said, "Dad, you can't go there. She will call the cops on you too." I told him not to worry. I wasn't going to knock on the front door like a guest. I needed to get Keisha's things. If Tiffany was playing the victim, she probably had not packed a bag for my granddaughter, and I needed to know what really happened in that house before the police arrived. I drove to their subdivision in the suburbs. The lawn was perfectly manicured. The hydrangeas were blooming blue and purple just like the magazines. It looked like the American dream, but I knew it was a crime scene. I pulled my truck around the block and parked in the alleyway. I walked to the back of the house. I tried the code on the back door keypad, the birthday of my late wife Bessie, which Jamal used for everything. It blinked red. She had changed it. That confirmed everything. You do not change the house codes 2 hours after a traumatic assault unless you have something to hide or you are planning a takeover. But Tiffany forgot one thing. I installed that garage door opener 3 years ago. I knew that model had an emergency release latch that you could trigger from the outside with a wire hanger if you knew exactly where to slide it. It took me 2 minutes. I felt the latch click, and I slid the heavy door up just enough to crawl under. I was inside. The garage was empty of cars, which meant she was gone probably to her mother's house to play the grieving victim role. I stepped into the kitchen, and the silence of the house was heavy. I expected to see overturned chairs, broken glass, or signs of the violent struggle she described to the police. Instead, the house was spotless. But it was a strange kind of spotless. There were 2 empty bottles of Dom Perignon champagne on the kitchen island. Not the cheap stuff. The $300 bottles. Next to them were 2 crystal flutes. 2. If Jamal had just beaten her, why were there 2 glasses? And why was there a half-eaten tray of expensive sushi? I walked through the living room. Her designer throw pillows were fluffed. The carpet was vacuumed. This was not the home of a battered woman. This was the home of someone who had been celebrating. I went upstairs to Keisha's room first. It was empty. Her bed was made. Her favorite stuffed rabbit was gone. Tiffany had shipped her off. I felt a surge of protectiveness. I needed to find where my granddaughter was, but first I needed ammunition. I walked into the master bedroom. The air smelled of her expensive perfume and something else, something like fresh paint. I started looking. I didn't know what I was looking for, but my gut told me the answer was here. I checked the nightstand, nothing. I checked the closet, nothing but rows of shoes that cost more than my truck. Then I saw the wastebasket in the corner near her vanity. It was overflowing. I tipped it out onto the white rug. Makeup wipes, tissues, and then a crumpled-up, glossy brochure. I smoothed it out. The headline read, "Elite Plastic Surgery, Chicago's Premier Aesthetic Center." I felt a cold knot in my stomach. I dug deeper into the pile and found a folded piece of paper. It was a pro forma invoice dated yesterday. I put on my reading glasses and my hands started to shake. It was a quote for a mommy makeover VIP package, breast augmentation, tummy tuck, and liposuction. The total cost, including the expedited scheduling fee, was exactly $70,000. The surgery was scheduled for this morning at 8 a.m. The time she claimed she was dying of a burst appendix. There was no emergency. There was no infection. She needed $70,000 because she wanted a new body, and she needed it today because she had already paid the non-refundable deposit. She was willing to let her husband rot in jail and label him a wife-beater just to pressure me into paying for her vanity. I sat on the edge of the bed, feeling sick, but I wasn't done. Under the bed, I saw a flash of pink. It was Keisha's iPad. Tiffany must have kicked it under there in her rush to leave. I pulled it out. The screen was cracked, but it still had battery. I pressed the home button. There was no passcode because it was a child's toy. But the messaging app was open. It wasn't Keisha's messages. It was Tiffany's Facebook Messenger. She had logged in to chat because Jamal had cut off her phone service last week to save money. I scrolled down and saw a conversation with a user named Chad PT Jim. The profile picture was a muscle-bound man with a spray tan standing in a locker room. My eyes scanned the messages sent at 2:30 a.m. right after I hung up the phone. The words burned into my retinas. Tiffany wrote, "He said no. The old bastard didn't buy the appendix story. I am going to plan B. I am going to call the cops and say Jamal hit me. That will get him out of the house. Once he is locked up, I will get the old Matt to pay bail or guilt him into helping." Then I saw the reply from Chad. He wrote, "Just make sure you get the cash, babe. We need that money for Miami. I am tired of waiting." Tiffany's last message was the one that turned my sadness into a cold, hard block of ice. She wrote, "Don't worry. If the old man pays, we go to Miami immediately after the surgery. I will dump the stupid husband and take half the house in the divorce. He is too weak to fight back anyway." I put the iPad down. I looked around the room that my retirement money had helped pay for. I looked at the wedding photo on the wall, where she was smiling that fake smile. She thought Jamal was weak. She thought I was just a checkbook. She had no idea that she had just declared war on the wrong family. I carefully took photos of the invoice and the brochure with my phone. I slipped the iPad into my jacket pocket. I wasn't just going to get Jamal out of jail. I was going to bury her. I stood in the center of the master bedroom holding the iPad, and I felt a fire in my chest that I had not felt since I was a young man. My first instinct was violence. I wanted to storm into that police station and shove the tablet in the sergeant's face. I wanted to drive to Tiffany's mother's house and drag her out by her hair to show the world what a liar she was. But I stopped myself. 35 years of fixing high-pressure steam pipes and volatile hospital generators taught me one crucial lesson. If you rush to fix a problem while the pressure is still high, you get burned. If you want to fix the problem permanently, you have to relieve the pressure first, and then you cut out the rot. I needed to be smart. I needed to be the old, foolish man she thought I was. I drove back to my house and sat in my recliner. I stared at the phone. I took a deep breath and dialed Tiffany's number. It rang 4 times before she picked up. Her voice was weak and raspy, a perfect performance for someone who was supposedly recovering from a brutal beating. "Hello, Booker," she whispered. I forced my voice to crack. I forced tears into my eyes, even though they were tears of pure rage, not sorrow. "Tiffany, I am so sorry," I said. "I saw Jamal in that cell. I saw his face. I saw what he did to you. I failed as a father. I raised a monster." There was a pause on the other end. She was listening. I continued. "I want to make this right, Tiffany. I know you need surgery. I know you are in pain. I went to the bank this morning. I am going to empty my retirement account. I am going to take a second mortgage on my house. I have the $70,000 cash. I just want you to drop the charges against Jamal. I cannot let my son go to prison even if he deserves it. Please take the money and just let him go." The silence on the phone was heavy. I could practically hear the gears turning in her head. She did not care about justice. She did not care about her safety. She cared about the money. Finally, she sighed a long, dramatic sigh. "Oh, Booker," she said, her voice suddenly a little stronger. "You know I love Jamal. This is so hard for me. But if it means he will get help, maybe I can do that. For the family." I clenched my fist so hard my fingernails dug into my palm. "Thank you, Tiffany," I said. "Come to my house tonight at 7. I will have the cash." As soon as I hung up the phone, the trembling in my hands stopped. I was not a victim anymore. I was the hunter. I had 5 hours until showtime. I picked up the phone again and called my old friend Marcus. We call him Sarge. He was a detective for 20 years before he retired, and now he runs a private security firm. He owes me a favor from the time I fixed his furnace in the middle of a blizzard for free. I told him everything. I told him about the text messages, the plastic surgery invoice, and the false police report. Sarge listened without saying a word. When I finished, he said simply, "I will be there at 6:30, and I am bringing a witness." Next, I called a family attorney who specializes in fraud. I told him to have the paperwork ready, but I knew that in a situation like this, the law is slow, but video is forever. I went to my workshop in the basement. I grabbed my tool bag. I took 3 high-definition cameras that I used to use to inspect ventilation shafts at the hospital. These were small lenses no bigger than a shirt button, but they recorded in 4K resolution. I went into the living room. I placed the first camera inside the eye of Keisha's teddy bear that she left at my house. I sat the bear on the armchair facing the sofa. I placed the second camera inside the face of the grandfather clock in the hallway to catch the entry. The third one I hid inside a decorative vase on the coffee table right where the money would be. I tested the feeds on my laptop. The picture was crystal clear. Every lie she told would be recorded in high definition. But I needed one more piece of bait to make the trap perfect. I needed the other rat. I pulled out Keisha's iPad again. I opened the Messenger app. My heart was pounding as I typed a message to Chad, the gym trainer. I pretended to be Tiffany. I wrote, "The old man caved. He is giving me the cash tonight at 7. Come to his house. We will take the money and leave for Miami tonight. Don't be late." I watched the screen. 3 dots appeared. Then the reply came. "I am on my way, babe." I smiled. The trap was set. At 6:55, I sat in my living room. I had placed a large manila envelope on the coffee table. It was stuffed with old newspapers, cut to the size of dollar bills, with a single $100 bill on top. It looked like a thick brick of cash. The house was quiet. Sarge was waiting in the kitchen out of sight. The cameras were rolling. At 7 o'clock sharp, the doorbell rang. I walked to the door, moving slow like a defeated old man. I opened it, and there she was. Tiffany. She deserved an Oscar for her costume. She had an ace bandage wrapped around her head, and her arm was in a sling. She was wearing no makeup, which made her look pale and sickly. She limped into the house, leaning on the doorframe. "Booker," she said softly, "thank you for doing this." I led her to the sofa. "Can I get you some tea?" I asked. She nodded. I poured her a cup and sat across from her. I looked at the envelope on the table. Her eyes locked onto it like a hawk spotting a mouse. "Tiffany," I said, "I just need to know one thing. This $70,000, is it really going to fix everything?" She looked at me, tears welling up in her eyes instantly. "Yes, Booker," she said. "The doctors say I need extensive reconstructive surgery on my face and ribs because of how hard Jamal hit me. And I need therapy. The trauma is too much. I just want to heal and move on." I nodded slowly. "So this money is strictly for your medical bills from the assault. It is not for anything else." "No," she said, reaching for the envelope. "It is for my survival." I wanted to vomit. She was lying to my face without blinking. She was destroying my son's life to pay for a tummy tuck. I let her hand touch the envelope. I let her feel the weight of it. She smiled a small, greedy smile. And just as her fingers curled around the paper, the front door exploded with a heavy knock. It was not a polite knock. Not a polite. It was a demand. Tiffany jumped. "Who is that?" she asked, her eyes wide. I sat back in my chair and crossed my arms. "I think that is the rest of your party," I said. The front door swung open with enough force to rattle the windows. Standing there was Chad, the personal trainer, filling up the doorway with his muscles and his arrogance. He did not look at me. His eyes went straight to the thick envelope on the table, and then to Tiffany. Tiffany shot up from the sofa, forgetting her fake limp. Her face went from pale victim to pure panic in a split second. "Chad. What are you doing here?" she hissed. "You are ruining everything. Get out." Chad laughed, and it was an ugly sound. He walked right past me like I was a piece of furniture and grabbed the envelope. "I am not going anywhere, babe," he said. "You texted me to come. You said the old man paid up and we were leaving for Miami tonight. I have a bookie who is going to break my legs if I do not pay him by midnight, so I am taking my cut right now." Tiffany lunged at him, grabbing his arm with the hand that was supposed to be in a sling. "You idiot! I did not text you!" she screamed. "We have not left yet. Put the money down before you blow my cover." Chad shoved her back onto the sofa. "Blow your cover," he sneered. "You mean the fake beating story? Look, I do not care about your drama, Tiffany. I just want the money you promised me for helping you set up your husband. You said if I helped you pick out the plastic surgeon, you would pay off my gambling debts." I sat there and took a sip of my tea. It was the best cup of tea I have ever tasted. I watched them tear each other apart. Tiffany was hysterical now, screaming at the top of her lungs. "I did all the work, Chad. I put on the makeup. I called the police. I smashed my own face against the wall. All you did was drive the getaway car. That is my money for my surgery." That was the moment. They had both said it. They had confessed to conspiracy, extortion, and filing a false police report, and they had done it in high-definition audio and video. I slowly placed my teacup on the saucer. The clink of the china cut through their screaming match. I stood up. I picked up the remote control and turned off the television that had been playing low background noise. The room went deadly silent. Chad and Tiffany both looked at me. I looked Chad dead in the eye, and then I pointed a finger at the grandfather clock. Then I pointed to the vase on the table, and finally I pointed to the teddy bear facing them. "I think that is enough," I said calmly. "Smile. You are on camera." Before the blood could even drain from Tiffany's face, the kitchen door pushed open. Sarge stepped out wearing his old police jacket, and behind him were 2 uniformed officers from the 4th District. Tiffany made a sound like a dying animal. She slumped back onto the sofa, covering her face with her hands. Chad tried to bolt for the door, but Sarge was faster. He had that boy in handcuffs before he could take 2 steps. The next hour was a blur of justice. The officers retrieved the recording from my laptop. They took the envelope, which they soon realized was filled with newspaper clippings. Tiffany was arrested on the spot. The charges were heavy: extortion, filing a false police report, child neglect, conspiracy to commit fraud. As they walked her out in real handcuffs this time, not the fake bandages, she tried to look at me. She tried to say, "Dad, please." I just turned my back on her. I said, "Officer, please make sure that woman stays away from my house and my family." By 10 o'clock that night, I was standing outside the county jail. The steel doors opened and Jamal walked out. He looked tired and broken, but when he saw me standing there by my old truck, he started to run. We hugged right there in the parking lot, 2 grown men crying under the streetlights. I told him it was over. I told him she was gone. I told him that I had Keisha and that we were going home. That night, we picked up some fried chicken and went back to my small house. We sat at the kitchen table, me, Jamal, and little Keisha. The house was small and it smelled like old wood and grease, but for the first time in 5 years, it felt peaceful. The air was clean. The parasite that had been sucking the life out of my son was gone. Jamal looked at me over his drumstick and said, "Thank you, Dad." I just nodded. I did not need thanks. I just needed my family back. This story taught me that love is powerful, but it should never make you blind. My son almost lost everything because he ignored the red flags, but he was lucky he had a father who was watching from the shadows. To all the parents out there, never stop protecting your children even when they are grown. And to anyone thinking they can trick an old man because he has gray hair and dirty hands, remember this. We built this world. We know how to fix it. And we definitely know how to take out the trash. If you are watching this and you felt that justice was served tonight, do me a favor. If you were in my shoes, would you have shown Tiffany any mercy? I want you to comment the word "no" below if you think she got exactly what she deserved. Do not forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more stories of justice and truth. I am Booker Coleman, and I will see you in the next video. Stay safe and watch your back.